The National Lotteries Commission Board chairperson, Professor Barney Pityana, says the NLC has been restructured to prevent corruption. The Commission today provided an update on its grant funding mandate earlier today. Well, Prof joins me now for a quick discussion. Prof, a very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Vuyo. Thank you very much for having me.
Good. I mean, from your opening remarks, where you're outlining the purpose of the briefing earlier, it would appear to me that your tenure so far could not have been a pleasure ride. How would you describe the 2 years and 1 month that you've been at the helm?
Thank you very much, Vuyo. It's been extremely exciting, actually, to be where we were, to really try to turn a very important institution of our governance in this country, to turn it around to serve the purpose for which it was intended. Now that is, by all accounts, a very exciting undertaking. However, we could not have anticipated the extent of the rot, but with it, a great deal of the hostility that comes with it. Not that we're expecting to be lauded and given roses and that sort of thing. No, we didn't expect that. But we did expect at least some level of rational understanding of people who know that it is important that this institution actually be turned around to serve the purpose for which it was intended. The exciting thing has been to work with a team of people, including the board, as well as some of the executives of the NLC, to really restructure the messaging of the organization and to as it were, rethink what this organization is about. And that is the purpose we're about right now. Finally, what we could not have anticipated is how difficult it is, how much resistance there is from within and without to the changes and the corporate transformation that we sought to serve. It was a lot more difficult than we anticipated, and yet we should have understood, I think, because what that does, it takes away the sort of pleasurable access to resources that people were used to over a rather long time. That's about 10 to 12 years, where they were actually engaged with the board of the time to actually strip the organization of its resources.
Now, from what the CEO or the commissioner told us, the biggest area of risk is, of course, the grant-making section of the NLC, and that's what you said you were going to restructure, because that's where money meant for the poor actually gets stolen. How are you going to do that? And especially given the fact that, at least from what reports earlier told us, part of the problem was that it was the minister was struggling to find or to make appointments because it had been a struggle to find suitable people. Meanwhile, the organization was inundated with literally thousands of applications. How are you going to resolve that part?
Two things. In fact, it's multiple things. The greatest thing about that is to make sure that the people who make applications and the people for whom grants are made actually deserve it. They deserve the grants that they receive, and they are held accountable for the grants that they receive. One of the commissioner set out the ways in which this is done, it's rather cumbersome and threatening to some people, because it means that their IDs are to be confirmed, their addresses must be confirmed, and this means working with Home Affairs, working with IPC, and working and making sure that the IDs are for the correct people, so that it should never again happen that there is a hijacking of NPOs that actually took place at industrial scale in the previous time. So that work has been rather cumbersome and very, very slow, and to some extent very, very annoying to the people, because they wanted to get on with it, and they seem to be burdening them and very burdensome for them, and for which we apologize. And we are now making sure that that process is simplified and people can actually apply directly electronically using online purposes. That will help ease the pressure that many people have been experiencing. The second thing that we've had to do, and which I'm very, very proud of, we've actually restructured the award of grants by proactive funding. You will recall that that is where the real problem was, that proactive funding in almost every instance, besides the hijacking of grants and that sort of thing. The proactive funding was where the stealing was taking place, because the certain elements of the board, namely the chairperson and the COO, between the two of them and one or two others, they made decisions and they were totally unaccountable. So we've restructured that completely. So now there will be no decisions that is being made on proactive funding without the decision being by research and approved by the board. And not only that, but there's a group of experts who will actually be the ones who actually analyze the purpose of that grant. So now, it can never happen again that the theft of significant amounts of money will ever take place, because of the way in which the proactive funding has been structured.
Okay, that's restructuring on your part, but also the SIU is then dealing with whether people who got the grants actually deserve them, and how those people are held accountable and trying to recoup some of those monies. But I want to, in the interest of time, also move on to another problem that you identified, which you found when your board took over, which was, as you called it, the politicization of the lottery, which I would imagine continues, certainly on the back of reports we've seen coming out of Parliament. Just expand on what you meant by the politicization of the lottery.
It became quite obvious to me, to really my surprise, how much the lottery was being drawn into the factional politics, especially of the African National Congress, but also of the factional politics, of the politics in our country as a whole. That is what we were confronted with, there's no doubt. That's what we were confronted with. So that they could actually utilize the question of the 300 million rand that was reclaimed by the state in terms of the PFMA, so that they could make an issue and say that they will ask the minister to dissolve the board, not having looked to see how the board was appointed and how does, in fact, the board ever gets dissolved, because there's no provision for the dissolution of the board in the Act, none whatsoever. So all these issues had nothing to do with the work of the board. They were extraneous to the work of the board, about which the board, by the way, there's nothing that the board can do, because there is no suggestion that the board has done X and Y and Z that is unlawful or illegal or corrupt or inefficient, because the act is very, very clear. The minister can remove individual members of the board for a very specific purpose, that is they don't perform the task for which they were appointed, they are involved in malfeasance or corruption, and none of those things can ever be proved against the board that is there at the moment. So it was quite clear that the portfolio committee was not interested in facts. They didn't want to know what work the board has done. They were not interested in the performance of the board, which was the purpose for which the appearance of the board on the 18th of September was about. So instead, you could feel that there is an attrition that was being drawn about the politics of the country, about which the board can do nothing. The board has nothing to do with the GNU, whatever view one takes. It's the government of the day. The board is not about to be drawn into making choices of a political nature about that. The second thing that I made it very clear, which the parliament doesn't understand, that by its very nature, the work of the National Lotteries Commission is political, in that it is seeking to address the shortcomings of the public provision and the public policies of the state. That there are so many people who are poor, so many people who go to bed without food, so many schools that are dysfunctional. So the way in which the NLC does its work, it's not about politicizing everything, but it is rather about equipping and empowering people at grassroots level to improve their own situations and their condition. That is the important thing that we are unashamed about, and it is the only way in which we can better the lives of people.
You know, it is precisely because of everything you've just said, Prof, that when you said these words, I want to play a clip right towards the end, right at the end of the briefing when you said this. I want you to take a listen to what you said, and then I'll complete my question.
We will not be the ones who take government or other government entities to court. We will not be going in and out of court, challenging government, because the Constitution in Chapter 3 is very, very clear. The Intergovernmental Relations Act is very, very clear. There is no way that the National Lotteries Commission is going to take the government to court. We're not going to do it. We're not going to take the minister to court. We're not going to take the Minister of the Treasury, Minister of Finance to court. We're not going to do it. Because there are ways in terms of the Intergovernmental Relations Act, in terms of Chapter 3 of the Constitution, that are there and are available to actually deal with issues of conflict between governmental institutions.
And the reason, I listened carefully to those words, and I was taken aback a little, because whether you're talking about the politicization you've described, or whether you're talking about the hostility you're talking about, or other people have written about fight back, both from former board members and former executives of the NLC. If we cast our minds back to state capture, how organs of the state were hollowed out, how whistleblowers were suppressed and others kicked out of their jobs. Some had to litigate in order to get their jobs back, or at least get compensation. It took, among other things, actually having to not only speak truth to power, but having to take the state or organs of the state head on.
Here is the truth. There is a background to that. The board chair of the time resisted removal by the minister well beyond his term of office. He served in the end for 11 years, and he should actually have served for no more than 10 years if he had the indulgence of the minister to be appointed the second time. That board actually sought to take the Auditor General to court because of an adverse audit that they actually received. That board resisted the right of the minister to actually hold the board accountable. Now, that's the background. We will never do that because it will never be necessary in the way in which we approach the work of the commission. It will never be necessary for the NLC not to recognize the rights and the power of the minister in terms of the act. And that needs to be said because the resources that were spent by the previous board at a time of enormous malfeasance and corruption to an industrial scale. Right now, the chairperson of that board is taking the president and the SIU to court for no other reason than that the president actually issued a proclamation because he argued against the law. He argues that the National Lotteries Commission is not an organ of state. Now, it will never happen, this scenario that you are painting will never happen either, because we don't have in our act any provision that says that we are there to hold government to account. There's no such a provision. And we are there to provide grants to community organizations that are actually engaged in doing the work of serving the needs of the poor and the needy. In other words, we provide grants. At no stage has any government ever sought to prevent the provision of grants. And the Act also makes it clear that the manner in which the grants are made cannot be interfered with by government, and none of the governmental activities and ministries and departments are entitled by law to participate and benefit from the funds of the National Lotteries Commission. So it will never happen because the law wouldn't allow it to happen. And in the 25 years of the National Lotteries Act, the government, no government has ever sought to undermine that responsibility.
Professor Pityana, thank you very much for your time.